She's a thief and she abused Grandma for years. My cousin Morgan didn't just say it, she screamed it across the lawyer's desk. She pointed a finger right at my face and told everyone in the room that I had stolen Grandma Eleanor's diamond rings, worth $18,000. She claimed they were right there in my bag. I didn't yell back. I didn't defend myself. I just sat there, completely silent, looking her dead in the eye while my hand rested on the very bag she was screaming about. Have you ever had to sit quietly while someone lied about you to your face? Drop a comment and tell me how you kept your cool. I'm reading every single one. For 5 years, Morgan had been nothing but a digital ghost in Grandma Eleanor's life. While I was the one changing bedpans, crushing pills into applesauce, and sleeping in a chair next to the hospice bed, Morgan was busy tagging herself at brunch in Dubai and finding herself in Tulum. She didn't visit once. Not when Grandma fell and broke her hip. Not when the dementia started to steal the names of the people she loved. And certainly not when the property tax bill came due. I looked at my Uncle Jeffrey, Morgan's father, sitting in the corner of the office. He was staring intently at his shoes, refusing to meet my gaze. He knew the truth. He knew exactly where my money had gone. Last year, when his gambling debts got so bad that loan sharks started parking outside Grandma's house, I was the one who wired him $5,000 to make them go away. I did it to protect Grandma, to keep the stress from killing her faster. Jeffrey took the money, cried on my shoulder, and promised to step up. He didn't. Instead, he drove Morgan to the mall. That was the dynamic. I was the wallet. They were the expenses. I was the nurse. They were the beneficiaries. I worked 60-hour weeks as a forensic auditor, hunting down hidden assets for corporate clients, only to come home and pour my salary into keeping the roof over Grandma's head. I fixed the leaking pipes. I paid for the 24-hour care in the final weeks. I held Grandma's hand when she took her last breath. Morgan didn't even make it to the funeral. She claimed she was stuck in customs. But I saw her Instagram stories. She was at a pool party in Miami. Yet here she was, wearing black, clutching a lace handkerchief, and performing the role of the grieving granddaughter for an audience of one. Mr. Brennan, the estate attorney. She wasn't crying because she missed Grandma. She was crying because she was broke. I knew her finances better than she did. I knew she had maxed out 4 credit cards and was 2 months behind on her luxury apartment rent. She needed this inheritance like a drowning woman needs air. She's unstable, Morgan sobbed, turning to Mr. Brennan. Donna has always been jealous of me. She knew Grandma loved me more. That's why she took the rings. She wanted to hurt me. It was a masterclass in projection. She took my exhaustion, the dark circles from sleepless nights caring for a dying woman, and painted it as mental instability. She took my silence for guilt, but she made one critical calculation error. She assumed that because I was quiet, I was weak. She assumed that because I had served them for years, I would continue to serve them by taking the fall. She forgot what I do for a living. I don't listen to stories. I follow the evidence. And while she was busy building a narrative, I had been busy building a file. I looked at Jeffrey again. He shifted in his seat, wiping sweat from his forehead. He knew Morgan was lying. He knew those rings weren't in my bag. But he also knew that if Morgan didn't get that money, they were both going under. He was trading my reputation for his survival. The injustice of it burned in my chest, hot and sharp, but I didn't let it reach my face. I simply adjusted my glasses and looked back at the lawyer. They thought this was a family dispute. They didn't realize it was an audit. Donna, Mr. Brennan said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and looked at me with a mixture of pity and professional obligation. Your cousin has made a very serious accusation. Do you wish to respond? The room went deadly silent. I could hear the buzzing of the fluorescent lights overhead. Morgan leaned forward in her chair, her eyes wide and hungry. She had stopped fake crying. Now, she was just watching, waiting for the explosion. She wanted me to scream. She wanted me to stand up and call her a liar. She wanted the drama because to a narcissist like Morgan, emotional reaction is currency. It's fuel. If I fought back, I validated her narrative that this was a family feud. A he said she said messy squabble where the truth gets lost in the noise. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. I had learned a long time ago that you cannot win an argument with someone who invents their own reality. You can't outscream a siren. You have to starve it. It's called the gray rock method. You become as boring, as unreactive, and as impenetrable as a rock. You deny them the emotional payout they feel entitled to. I took a slow breath, smoothed the fabric of my skirt, and looked Mr. Brennan in the eye. No, I said, my voice flat and monotone. I have nothing to say to her. Let's proceed with the protocol. Morgan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. She blinked, confused by the lack of resistance. She had expected a fight, and my silence threw her off rhythm. She looked at her father, Jeffrey. But he was busy wiping sweat from his upper lip with a crumpled tissue. Mr. Brennan nodded slowly. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of crisp white paper. He placed it in the center of the mahogany conference table. "Very well," he said. "Before we can move to the distribution of assets, or address any accusations regarding the estate, state probate law requires a formality. This is an affidavit of no possession." He tapped the paper with his pen. "By signing this document, you are stating legally, under penalty of perjury, that you are not currently in possession, nor do you have knowledge of the location, of any missing assets belonging to the estate of Eleanor Vance. Specifically, the diamond jewelry in question." Morgan didn't even hesitate. She grabbed the pen with a flourish, her movements jerky and arrogant. "I'll sign it," she announced, her voice high and self-righteous. "I have nothing to hide, unlike some people in this room." She scribbled her signature aggressively, the pen scratching loud against the paper. She pushed the document toward her father. Jeffrey hesitated, his hand shaking as he took the pen. He looked at me, then at Morgan, then at the door. He knew exactly what was happening. But he was too deep in the hole to stop climbing down. He signed his name, a jagged scrawl that barely looked like letters. Then, Mr. Brennan slid the paper to me. Morgan crossed her arms, a smug look of triumph plastered on her face. She thought she had me cornered. She believed that because she had planted the rings in my bag earlier that morning, slipping them in while I was in the restroom, that I was trapped. If I signed, she'd call the police and prove I was a liar. If I didn't sign, I looked guilty. She didn't know I had felt the extra weight in my bag the moment I picked it up. She didn't know I had checked. And she certainly didn't know that the game she was playing was checkers, while Grandma Eleanor had been teaching me chess since I was 6 years old. I picked up the pen. I didn't look at Morgan. I didn't look at the bag sitting by my feet. I simply signed my name, in clear, steady cursive. The trap was set. The moment the ink dried, Morgan wasn't just a liar anymore. She was a felon who had just committed perjury in front of a court officer. As soon as Mr. Brennan pulled the affidavit away, the tears stopped. Just like that. It was as if someone had flipped a switch behind Morgan's eyes, cutting the power to the grieving granddaughter performance. She sat back in her chair, a cold, predatory smile curling the corners of her mouth. She looked at her phone, checking the time, then looked at me. "You really thought I'd let you walk out of here, didn't you?" she asked, her voice dropping an octave, losing the tremble she'd used for the lawyer's benefit. "You thought you could just deny it and go home?" "I signed the paper, Morgan," I said calmly. "If there's nothing else—" "Oh, there is something else," she interrupted, cutting me off with a sharp laugh. "See, I knew you'd try to weasel out of it. You're slippery, Donna. You always have been, so I made sure there wouldn't be any debate." She leaned forward, placing her elbows on the mahogany table. "I called the police 20 minutes ago. Before we even walked into this building." Mr. Brennan frowned, looking up from his files. "Miss Vance, that was unnecessary. This is a civil matter regarding the estate. We haven't even determined—" "It's not a civil matter," Morgan snapped, her eyes locked on mine. "It's a felony. Grand larceny. Elder abuse." She paused, savoring the moment. "But I know how the police work. They take hours to show up for a simple theft report. They file a report and leave. I couldn't risk that. I needed them here now. I needed them angry." A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I looked at Jeffrey. His face had gone ashen gray. He stared at his daughter as if seeing a stranger. "Morgan," he whispered. "What did you say to them?" Morgan didn't look at her father. She kept her gaze fixed on me, her pupils dilated with the thrill of what she was doing. "I told them my cousin was having a psychotic break," she said softly. "I told them she was screaming about burning the building down, and just to be safe. I told them I saw a knife in her bag." The room seemed to tilt. Mr. Brennan dropped his pen. Even Jeffrey gasped, a sharp intake of air that sounded like a dying engine. This wasn't just a lie. It was a weapon. She had swatted me. She had summoned armed officers, pumped them full of adrenaline and fear, and pointed them at a woman sitting in a small, enclosed room. She wasn't just trying to frame me. She was trying to get me hurt, maybe even killed. In the distance, the faint wail of sirens began to bleed through the thick glass of the office window. They were getting louder fast. "You're insane," Jeffrey stammered, standing up. "Morgan, you can't tell the police there's a weapon when there isn't one. If they come in here with guns drawn, then Donna better not make any sudden moves," Morgan said, shrugging. "It's her word against mine. And I'm the grieving victim who just wants her grandmother's rings back." The sirens were close now. A screaming wall of sound that drowned out the hum of the overhead lights. Tires screeched on the pavement outside. Car doors slammed. My heart hammered against my ribs. a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but I forced my breathing to slow. In, out, in, out. Panic was death. Morgan wanted me to jump up. She wanted me to start shouting, to dump my bag out on the table, to look exactly like the manic, unstable woman she had described to the dispatcher. I didn't move a muscle. I slowly, deliberately lifted my hands from my lap. I placed them flat on the conference table. Palms down, fingers spread wide. Visible. Non-threatening. Still, I looked at the door. I had anticipated a trap, but Morgan had escalated it to a war zone. She thought she was calling in the cavalry to destroy me. She didn't realize she had just invited the only people in the world who could validate the evidence I had spent the last 48 hours preparing. "Sit down, Jeffrey," I said, my voice steady. "They're here." The heavy oak door shuddered under the force of a fist. "Police, open up." Morgan didn't wait. She scrambled out of her chair, heels clicking frantically on the hardwood floor, and threw the door open before Mr. Brennan could even stand. She threw herself toward the uniform that filled the doorway, performing fear with the dedication of a method actor. "She's in there!" Morgan shrieked, pointing a trembling hand back at me. "She has a knife. She's crazy. Please, you have to help me." Two officers swept into the small room, their hands resting on their holsters, eyes scanning for threats. The sudden influx of bodies made the small, unventilated office feel like a pressure cooker. "Ma'am, step away from the table," the lead officer commanded, his voice filling the room. "Keep your hands where I can see them." I didn't flinch. I kept my palms flat on the mahogany, fingers spread. "I am unarmed, officer," I said, my voice calm, level, and distinct. "My name is Donna Vance. I am a certified forensic auditor. The woman who called you is currently attempting to frame me for a felony theft she committed this morning." "She's lying," Morgan yelled, her face blotchy and wet with fresh tears. "Just check her bag. The rings are in there. She threatened to stab me if I told anyone." The officer looked between us. On one side, a hysterical woman in white claiming her life was in danger. On the other, a woman in a business suit sitting as still as a statue. He gestured to my bag. "Ma'am, do you consent to a search of your property?" "I do," I said. "But before you touch anything, you need to know what you're looking for." Mr. Brennan stepped forward then, placing himself between the police and the table. "Officers, I am Theodore Brennan, the executor of the estate. The jewelry in question was not stolen from a jewelry box. It was removed from a high-security wall safe, a safe that was specifically prepared for this exact scenario." The officer paused, his brow furrowing. "Prepared how?" "It was a decoy safe," Mr. Brennan said, his eyes locking onto Morgan. "Eleanor Vance suspected her assets were being targeted, so we filled the safe with paste replicas and treated the interior with a forensic detection powder. It's invisible to the naked eye, but highly reactive to ultraviolet light." Morgan stopped crying. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked down at her hands, rubbing them against her white dress instinctively. "Officer," I said, reaching into my blazer pocket slowly. "I have a UV flashlight right here. If I stole those rings, my hands will be glowing. If Morgan stole them, well, let's find out." I didn't wait for permission. I clicked the small metal cylinder on. A beam of purple light cut through the dim room. I swept it across my own hands first. Nothing. Just pale skin. I swept it over my bag. Clean. Then, I turned the beam toward Morgan. She tried to pull away, to hide her hands behind her back, but she wasn't fast enough. The light hit her, and the room gasped. Her hands weren't skin-colored anymore. They were coated in a vibrant, neon-orange slime. It looked radioactive. The dye had stained her palms, her fingertips, and the cuticles of her manicured nails. It was everywhere. I moved the light down. The handle of her pristine white designer handbag was glowing with the same aggressive orange handprints. "That dye is transfer-resistant," I explained, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "It bonds to oils in the skin. You can't wash it off with water." "You touched the safe, Morgan. You took the rings. And then you touched your bag." The lead officer looked at Morgan's glowing hands, then at the orange smudges on her dress where she had wiped them. The tension in his posture shifted. He wasn't looking at a victim anymore. He was looking at a suspect. "Ma'am," the officer said to Morgan, his tone dropping the courtesy. "Open your bag. Now." The officer didn't wait for Morgan to comply. He reached for the white designer bag, his gloved hand glowing faintly orange where he touched the handle. He dumped the contents onto the table. Lipstick, a wallet, a phone, and there, tumbling out with a heavy clatter, were 3 velvet pouches. He opened the first one. A diamond solitaire ring. He shone his own flashlight on it. It glowed orange. "That's enough," the officer said, his voice hard. Morgan Vance, you are under arrest for grand larceny and filing a false police report. He reached for his cuffs. The metal rattling in the small room. This was it. The end of the road. But Morgan wasn't done. She had one card left. The nuclear option she used whenever cornered. The one shield she knew society was terrified to crack. She screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, weaponized victimhood. She grabbed her stomach and doubled over, hyperventilating. No, you can't. I'm pregnant, she wailed, looking up at the officers with wide, terrified eyes. I'm 8 weeks along. It's high risk. The stress. You'll kill the baby. If you cuff me. You're endangering my child. The officer froze. His hand hovered over his belt. In today's climate, no cop wanted to be the one on the news dragging a screaming pregnant woman out of a lawyer's office. It was a liability nightmare. Uncle Jeffrey, who had been shrinking into his chair, suddenly sprang to life. He saw the lifeline Morgan had thrown. She's telling the truth, he stammered, standing up. She told me yesterday. She's delicate. You can't arrest her like this. We need an ambulance, not a squad car. Morgan sobbed harder, clutching her belly. Please. I just want to go to the hospital. I'm having cramps. It was a brilliant pivot. If they took her to the hospital, she bought time. She could formulate a new lie. Claim the stress caused a miscarriage. Sue the department. Turn the narrative back into her favor. For a moment, it looked like it was going to work. The lead officer looked at his partner, uncertainty clouding his features. I didn't say a word. I didn't argue. I simply reached into my own bag and pulled out an iPad. It wasn't new. It was a cracked, 3-year-old model with a faded cover. Morgan probably didn't even recognize it, even though she was the one who had cracked the screen. 6 months ago, she had borrowed it when her phone died, complaining that she needed to check her messages. Being Morgan, she had never bothered to log out of her iCloud account. She was too lazy, too entitled to think about security. She assumed her digital footprint didn't matter because she thought she was untouchable. I tapped the screen. The device was synced to her current phone. Her messages were updating in real time. I swiped to a conversation from 3 days ago. Officer, I said quietly. The officer looked at me, annoyed by the interruption. Ma'am, step back. We have a medical situation here. You don't have a medical situation, I said, turning the screen toward him. You have a perjury situation. On the screen was a text thread between Morgan and her ex-boyfriend, a man she had been trying to win back. The message bubble was blue, sent from her account just last Tuesday. Only good decision I made with you was getting that tubal ligation 3 years ago. Best investment of my life. No kids, no traps, no problem. The officer read the text. He read it twice. Then he looked down at Morgan, who was still clutching her stomach, rocking back and forth, moaning about cramps. The sympathy vanished from his face, replaced by the cold, hard look of a man who realized he was being played. Ma'am, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. Stand up. Now. But the baby! Morgan shrieked, committing to the bit until the bitter end. There is no baby, the officer snapped. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. We're adding perjury to the list. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on 20 years of lies. Morgan didn't go quietly. She kicked, screamed, and spat, dragging her heels against the hardwood floor as the officers hauled her out of the office. Her wails about my baby and my rights echoed down the hallway until the heavy door finally clicked shut, sealing the noise out. The silence that followed was heavy, ringing in my ears. The air conditioning was still broken, the room still stifling, but the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. It was just me, Mr. Brennan, the remaining officer, and Uncle Jeffrey. Jeffrey stood in the corner, trembling. He looked at the empty doorway where his daughter had just vanished. Then he looked at me. Slowly, painfully, he sank to his knees. It wasn't a graceful movement. He collapsed like a building whose foundations had finally rotted through. Donna, he choked out, his hands clasped together in a parody of prayer. Please. She's my daughter. She's sick. She doesn't know what she's doing. You can't let them take her to prison. She won't survive in there. I looked down at him. For 20 years, I had seen this man as a victim. A sad, unlucky uncle, who just couldn't catch a break. I had pitied him. I had covered for him. I had paid his debts because I thought he was just weak. Now, looking at him groveling on the carpet, I realized I had been wrong. He wasn't weak. He was a parasite. I'm not pressing charges, Jeffrey, I said coldly. His head snapped up, hope flooding his watery eyes. Oh, thank God. Thank you, Donna. I knew you were family. I knew. I'm not pressing charges because I don't have to, I interrupted. my voice slicing through his relief. The state is pressing charges. Grand larceny. Perjury. Filing a false report. Those aren't personal grievances, Jeffrey. Those are crimes against the state. It's out of my hands. You can drop the complaint, he begged, crawling a few inches toward me. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. I'll pay you back. I'll get a loan. I swear. A loan? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. From whom? Another shark? Or were you planning to use the money from the house sale? I walked over to the table and picked up one last piece of paper. It was a thermal printout, small and crinkled. You want to talk about misunderstandings? I asked. Let's talk about this morning. The Decoy safe didn't just have die packs. It had a digital access log. I held the paper in front of his face. At 8 a.m., someone tried to access the safe. They didn't use Grandma's birthday. They didn't use Morgan's birthday. They entered 0412. That's April 12th. That's your birthday, Jeffrey. His face went from pale to ghostly white. You tried to open it first, I said, my voice devoid of mercy. You tried to steal the rings yourself, but you couldn't get it open because the mechanism was jammed. So you went and got Morgan. You told her the code. You drove her here. You waited in the car while she did your dirty work. I turned to the police officer who was busy writing in his notebook. Officer, I said, handing him the printout. This is the access log from the safe. It places Mr. Vance at the scene of the crime, attempting to bypass security measures immediately prior to the theft. Jeffrey made a sound like a wounded animal. Donna, no. I drove her, that's all. I didn't touch anything. You drove her to the pawn shop 5 years ago too, I said. I saw the logs. You watched her steal from your own mother and you said nothing because you needed a cut. Your silence wasn't love, Jeffrey. It was accomplice liability. And today, you're going to pay the bill. The officer stepped forward, unhooking his second pair of cuffs. Sir, stand up and place your hands behind your back. I didn't watch them take him away. I picked up my bag, nodded to Mr. Brennan, and walked out the door. The heat outside hit me, humid and heavy. But for the first time in years, I could breathe. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the real estate agent Grandma had recommended. Hi, I said when she answered. I'm ready to list the house. And I want to donate the proceeds to the Elder Justice Initiative. Yes, all of it. 6 months later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the sun dip below the city skyline. It wasn't a penthouse, and it didn't have gold fixtures, but it had something far more valuable. Silence. The lease was in my name. The furniture was paid for with my salary. There were no hidden cameras, no decoy safes, and absolutely no family heirlooms to fight over. I took a sip of my tea and checked the notification on my phone. The wire transfer had cleared. The proceeds from the sale of Grandma Eleanor's Victorian house, $820,000, had been deposited directly into the accounts of the Elder Justice Initiative. It was the largest single donation in their history. I didn't keep a dime. I didn't want their money. I didn't want anything that tied me to a lineage of greed and betrayal. I had my own savings, my own career, and my own integrity. That was enough. As for the family I left behind, justice had been swift and unsentimental. Morgan is currently serving a 3-year sentence at the state correctional facility. It turns out that judges don't look kindly on people who waste police resources with fake weapon reports, especially when they commit perjury in the process. Her influencer career ended the moment her mugshot hit the internet. She finally got the fame she wanted, just not the kind she could monetize. Uncle Jeffrey avoided jail time by pleading guilty and turning state's witness against a local loan shark he'd been involved with. But he lost everything else. He's bankrupt, on probation, and working double shifts at a warehouse to pay off his restitution fees. He sends me letters sometimes, begging for a second chance. I return them unopened. People ask me if I feel sad about losing my family. They ask if it's lonely without the Sunday dinners and the holiday gatherings. I tell them the truth. I didn't lose a family. I lost a group of people who mistook my kindness for weakness and my silence for submission. I lost a burden I was never meant to carry. Grandma Eleanor used to say that the best revenge is a life well lived. I think she was right. But I'd add a footnote to that.